Welcome to the podcast of the American Diversity Report. I'm Deborah Levine, the editor-in-chief of the ADR and your host of these podcasts. Here we interview wonderful change makers, innovative, creative people who make a difference. And with me today is one of them, Janet Rutkowski. She is a Brooklyn-based artist with a studio in Barryville, New York. She's a self-taught artist who primarily works in steel, although during the pandemic, she created hundreds of works on paper entitled Quarantine Compositions. Janet is also a curator and is currently has a large show in celebration of Women's History Month, and it's entitled Behind the Mask, The Art of Women Welders. It features 29 women welders and over 50 works of powerful art, as well as one of her large-scale pieces. Welcome, Janet.
Well, thank you so much, Deborah, for having me on the show, and thanks to Benjamin Franklin for hooking us up. I really appreciate it. It's a very exciting time for me right now because I do have this show that just opened on March 7th, and it was actually 30 sculptors. We added one woman at the last minute, and she is 87 years old, still working in Queens. Her name is Judith Weller. So we were lucky to have that last minute addition to the show. And the show opened up with a bang. We were on Pix 11 News, and it's all because of this was in celebration of Women's History Month.
I
And it
love
was
it.
my vision in the fall. Oh, and then my co-curator had the same idea, was to propose this show in honor of women who weld.
I love it. Women's History Month is amazing to me. What comes out becomes visible, rises to the top. But you've been doing this for a long time.
I've been welding for almost 40 years now.
Wow, 40 years. How did you get started in that?
Oh boy, this is a long story. I'll try to not make it too long. Well, as you know, I went to the High School of Art and Design because it was in my bio. But I didn't really do much with art after I left. And 10 years later, I was getting that urge. And I took a class at the new school, a drawing class, and okay, this was all right. But I had remembered there was a someone who had a studio in right outside of Soho on Grand and Crosby, and I went there, and he was a stone carver, and I started to take lessons with him. And this name either people know or don't know. It's quite a shame that they don't know his name. And this was Arturo di Modica. And he was the sculptor of the Bull on Wall Street.
Oh
And
my
I started,
goodness.
yeah, I started stone carving with him. He literally plopped a piece of marble on a tabletop and gave me some chisels and said, "Do something," and left. And I was like, okay. But I created a horse's head, and it was my first three-dimensional piece, and it was wonderful. From there, I started to, because I couldn't learn enough because he was crazy, but it was wonderful, wonderful crazy. And I started with a school called the Art Life Craft Studio on the Upper East Side, and it was a father and son who ran it, Sebastian Maneo and his son Ronnie. Ronnie was a little bit more of my age, and I learned stone carving, wood carving, and clay. So I was starting to create these very unusual clay pieces called galactic flowers. And Ronnie said to me, "They are blowing up in the kiln and destroying everybody else's pieces. So you must," he said, "this is all I can tell you. You should learn how to weld." So I found the Sculpture Center, which used to be on the Upper East Side. It's now located in Long Island City. It was on 69th between Lex and 3rd. They had a beautiful gallery in the bottom, and they offered stone carving, clay, wood, and steel. And I learned how to weld with a teacher called John Snow. I lost contact with him. The minute I had fire in my hands and a torch, that was it, done. I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a fire sign, so maybe that was the connection. But it was instant love, and I haven't stopped since that time.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, it's something that I just love, and I'm pretty much self-taught. I really learned, and then I was doing sculpture, but they were very raw, and I started to make some furniture for myself. And before you know it, I was making kind of functional art and then architectural metals. But it took me a little bit off the path of fine art. And there was a point I decided I would just concentrate on sculpture. And that's where I am now. I'm so, so happy I did that.
Oh, that sounds wonderful. This is a wonderful women's history story right there. You know, how things happen,
And
right?
I love it. I love working in the studio. And I have been working around men in shops, where I would go and they would help me do things. And I never had an issue. They always were fascinated when I was working. If I was plasma cutting intricate designs, that people would come and say, "What is she doing? I can't believe you could do that free-handed." And it was such a wonderful experience. So I never had an issue with it. But people would always say outside of that, say, "You weld?" Like, really? I'm like, why? It's not rocket science, it's a tool and something, it's like the stove, it's like learning how to cook, and it's something that's not that esoteric. And that's what I like to project. And having this show, because all these women have had that similar situation, that you're welding, and it's not that unusual. And a little bit of history. Of course, in our press release, it talks about during World War I, but actually earlier in France during the 1800s, when there was that huge art movement, um, there were women that were artists, fine artists. A lot of them were not welding, but they were working bronzes. One was Claudette Colbel, and she was actually Rodin's muse, but she did bronze work. Um, then it kind of came more towards World War I, where women in England were needed in the workforce when the men went to war, and they started the Society of Women Welders.
Oh my
And
goodness.
and then here in America, we had that second half during World War II, where you see Rosie the Riveter. So, when women have picked up where men had left off, to help out. So
Yeah.
it's a wonderful, you know, occupation.
So are these welders organizations part of the inspiration for you to go along with them in this
No,
artistic
I
field?
actually I actually learned this when I was looking through history. Of course, everybody's heard of Rosie the Riveter,
Yes.
but I know actually Karen Kettering Dimmitt, who is my co-curator. She was actually the one that dug up that little blurb of history about the women in 1917. And the Society of Women Welders had a beautiful logo that I would love to steal and maybe start our own Society of Women Welders. But there are some groups throughout the country that there are some welding women groups throughout the country, industrial welders. Unfortunately, I reached out to them, but it was maybe too late for them to be part of this show.
Oh, okay. But I'm sure there's a bit of a difference between the industrial welders and the artist welders, or is there?
Well, they're learning the technique and they're working with the technique, but I would hope that some of them would go home and fool around. And because it is a creative process, maybe they would have to make a piece of furniture or a shelf or, they have the skills. Somebody
Yeah,
would say, hey, we need a table. So they could do that, or a chair. So you would hope that maybe from there they would take it a little bit.
I love it. I love it. Oh my. So you have this wonderful show going on,
And
right?
this is what I'd really like to like. I would really like to promote this show. It opened on the 7th. It's up through April 28th. They extended the dates
Okay.
because I think the, these women, they're all very different, and they run in age from early 30s to 87. And such a powerful statement. People come into the show and they just are flawed, and I'm flawed. Like I'm even mesmerized that myself and Karen did this. It just took off on its own. We are having next Saturday on March 23rd. We're having an artist meet and greet, like a little brunch between 2 and 4. This is at Culture Lab in Long Island City. And so we're hoping people will come for that. And we will have an artist talk with a moderator sometime early April. But the show
Wonderful.
is running, so people should go visit. It's really an important show. Please. And Lab is I've this is the fourth show I've done there, and the third that I've curated, is a wonderful institution in Queens. We don't have that many art institutions, not for profit. They show a diversity of everything, from artists to comedy to musicians to theater to performance. They've given platforms for the gay community. They had a show of women from Iran, Iranian artists. So
Wow.
they really give a voice to many different types of people. And it's Edjo Wheeler and Tess Housen are the kind of the top people there. And they're just wonderful to work with. They're so supportive. They do everything they can for the artists. They put up the show, they provide all the refreshments. They're there hands on for everything we have to do. So
That's
I think it's, I
great
really encourage everyone to go there, whether it's my show or somebody else's show, and see what they do.
to see there. Well, we certainly need more of those kinds of platforms
Very
so
true.
that artists like yourself and the people that you are promoting, have a chance to be seen and heard. And what do you think the role of women in the current art world today? How do we figure?
We're figuring a lot better than we used. So I mean, I've been on the art scene for a long time, and it's been a struggle. I don't know why, and I'm still not really represented. And it's not as important to me now. I mean, I would like it. I'm working towards it, but women, it it was very few women that were really getting recognition up until now. And now, because women are in the forefront in everything, they're also in the forefront in the art scene. There are some dynamic women now that are just leading the art scene, and women of color, and just there's so much diversity in it at this point that the art world has really changed. It's really opened up and let a lot of different types of people into it, and it's and everything is different. Styles are different. You have everything from very traditional work to like graffiti, and it's all accepted now. It's all good. It's a
I
good
love it.
time.
I love it. When
Maybe the
I, yeah.
pandemic, maybe the pandemic had a little bit of an influence on that also, because I found I was selling art during the pandemic. People were home, they were bored, they were cooking, cleaning, doing things, but they were also looking at their surroundings. And I think they felt they needed beauty. And not only myself, but a lot of artists were selling work at that time. So
Hmm.
it kind of opened up an innerness for people to how to be by yourself and how to look at your surroundings and make your surroundings as beautiful as everything else in your
And do you think that mindset will be ongoing?
life. I hope so.
Me too.
I find I find I'm a little bit busier now, and I don't do any sketching. And my son will say, "Why don't you do those incredible drawings?" And I'm like, "I don't have time." So yes, we are back in that Zoom world, Zoom meetings and TikTok, and we're going constantly. So sometimes you do have to sit back and relax and breathe, take
Yeah.
it in.
Well, artists definitely need that time to
Yes,
create, to
yes,
mull over options and create something that hasn't existed before.
yes.
Yeah.
It's very, very important.
So, what would your advice be for a young person who might think of themselves as an artist in the future? What would you tell them?
Just follow your heart. Follow your heart. It's not an easy life. It's not. You have to. Most of the times, you have to do other things to support yourself. Um, but if you have that desire and that fire inside of you, you can't deny it. You could put it aside for a little bit, like maybe I've done and other people. You could push it on the side, but there comes a point in your life when you're like, oh my God, I need to create. And there are so many people that are not doing art, or my husband's a musician or music, and they will say to us, and they're very successful, maybe corporately, they make a lot of money, and they're like, I really wish I could play an instrument. I really wish I could draw. But they probably can, because I feel like everyone has something inside of them that is creative, and it's just touching upon that.
Yeah,
So if you don't think about having to make money. Think about being true to yourself and create something in the world that makes it a better world.
absolutely. And for people who have children, right, it's really helpful to expose them to the arts very
Oh,
young.
most
Music,
important.
dance, art, you name it. I know my
Yeah.
parents did, and
And literature, literature.
oh, yes, indeed. My father,
So that's one thing I
mm,
wanted to mention since you're a writer.
oh,
Growing up,
yeah.
I'll say I was a voracious reader. I ate books. I mean, I read everything from, and I wasn't such a wonderful academic person. School was not my, I wasn't so well in school, but I read everything from like French writers in the 1800s, like, Proust and Balzac and
Yes.
Zola, to Colette and Anais Nin. And then I really loved sci-fi fantasy, so I read all of the, Dune, like, and Frank Herbert and Tolkien, and so of course Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones, all those sci-fi novelists. I
Yes.
think Philip Pullman is one of my favorites. That was the Golden Compass,
Uh,
because I love that idea of other universes, alternative universes, where maybe it's a better place. Take yourself outside of the norm. Take and So a lot of my work has to deal with riffs or alternative
I
universes.
love it. I love it. Yes.
So I know as a writer you would like that,
I
because
do indeed.
my son carried on. I read to him every day. I read him books that he couldn't understand when he was a baby, and
Good for
he was
you.
also a reader. Reading is really important. It's
Yes,
really
it is.
important art form.
It is indeed. And my father and my mother who wrote uh, and published an article back in the 1940s about the impact of stories on children. And I think she practiced it on me. And I started reading at age like 3 or 4, whether she liked it or not. And I taught my daughter the same. I once found that there were books on the floor in the bathroom outside the shower. And I said to my daughter, "Why are they here?" She says, "Well, I read in the shower." I said, "How do you do
Oh,
that?" And she says, "Well, I
wet.
have I put my back to the water, I read, and then I toss it out, turn around, finish the shower." I thought, well, I guess I taught her something.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful.
We
I
have
think my
fun.
son was so frightened. I was reading him um, Camelot or Merlin, and the Madame Mim, who was the witch. There was like some kind of drawing. I couldn't even open that page in the book, you know. So King Arthur, and Knights of the Round Table. So he
Yeah.
was frightened of Madame Mim for a long time. But it's wonderful. It's a wonderful thing.
It is. It is. It shapes people. It broadens their minds for a whole life, and that's what
Well,
we
it
do.
it's my art greatly. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Well, I'm so delighted to have this chance to talk with you, trade notes, and have you share this journey, which is quite unusual for most of us to hear, and we should hear more. And I wish I could be there at your show, but I'll be looking online for photos, and I'm sure it'll be wonderful. So, congratulations to you.
Thank
Is
you.
there anything else you'd like to add before we
Well,
wrap
I'd
up?
just like to, if anyone would like to see my work, of course, I have my website, which is, janetrutkowski.com. I'm on all the social media platforms: Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, but probably Instagram, where my moniker is Steely Jan,
I love
is
it.
the best place to find me. And I would really love to have people come to the show. So
Well,
find me on Instagram, and all the photos of the show will be there. And please come see it.
wonderful. Will do. And thank you again. This has been
Thank you.
wonderful. And thank you, audience, for tuning in. This is so special. Um, Onward and upward, right? Yes.
Definitely.
All right.